Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and we've talked so much in the past about banker manipulation, especially of the gold and silver markets. There's a lot of spoofing going on. We've talked in the past countless times about, Deutsche Bank rigging the silver and gold markets, found in court guilty of doing just that. And of course in that, they were also doing this at the same time alongside banks like HSBC, BNP Paribas, Bank of America, Scotia Bank, so many other banks. It's one of their most obvious practices. I mean, they get by on manipulating markets, spoofing markets, and this story comes out of Zero Hedge today, and it says these are the 6 traders who were just arrested for manipulating the gold market. So recently, a few traders were just arrested for spoofing the market, and they were currently or formerly employed by UBS, HSBC, and Deutsche Bank. Surprise! And as the story goes on to say, this was confirmed by a CFTC press release which announced criminal and civil enforcement actions against 3 banks and 6 individuals involved in commodities fraud and spoofing schemes. Here's what got far less publicity. It wasn't just any futures that were spoofed. All the banks and traders busted were charged for spoofing the precious metals markets, i.e. gold and silver. Here are the banks in question and the penalties. Deutsche Bank will pay $30 million civil monetary penalty and undertake remedial relief. The orders find that from at least February 2008 and continuing through at least September 2014, Deutsche Bank AG, by and through certain precious metals traders, engaged in a scheme to manipulate the price of precious metals futures contracts by utilizing a variety of manual spoofing techniques with respect to precious metals futures contracts traded on the Commodity Exchange Inc. COMEX, and by trading in a manner to trigger customer stop-loss orders. UBS will pay $15 million civil monetary penalty and undertake remedial relief. The order finds that from January 2008 through at least December 2013, UBS, by and through the acts of certain precious metal traders on the spot desk, attempted to manipulate the price of precious metals futures contracts by utilizing a variety of manual spoofing techniques with respect to precious metals futures contracts traded on the COMEX again. And then very similarly, HSBC will pay a monetary penalty of $1.6 million and seize and desist from violating the Commodity Exchange Act's prohibition against spoofing, and blah, 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 blah. And it goes on to kind of show the names of those that were involved. Some of them are names that I do not wish to attempt to even pronounce. And going down to the bottom of the article, of course, it mentioned, meanwhile, the S&P 500 manipulation by the Fed and spoofing by HFTs continue apace and will as long as the market keeps levitating, because it is only when stocks crash that finger pointing begins. So this goes into a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about for so long. Of course, there's been massive manipulation of the gold and silver markets going back a long time. There's manipulation of every market you could think of. There's literally no market that isn't in some way manipulated. And of course, we've gone into before. This will only go on so long because the bankers are coming to the very end of their existence. And, as we look further into it, we see the manipulation is getting further and further exposed. And that's the way it's going to be. I look at gold and silver, John, and I think of, like I've said it before, pushing a beach ball underwater and it gaining pressure. And the second that banking system goes down, and it inevitably has to do so, that beach ball will shoot up in the air. What do you think of all this?
Well, I think we should look at the picture at the bottom of the screen here. It looks like how Janet Yellen is contemplating how she is going to get her prison sentence in the coming years for, this is like just minimal what these traders have done. Of course, they got their orders from the guys above to do this. It's like so funny how they just have these scapegoats that they always throw out. They always take these idiots that are greedy and want to make a ton of money for themselves, doesn't care. But they use them, of course, as scapegoats, and they're like, oh yeah, that guy is like a terrible guy. We would never do that in our organization. That's JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. They didn't do stuff like that. That's why they're not mentioned here. They're good banks. Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein, they're perfect people. They're magnificent people. And of course, Jamie Dimon, he was just crawl up the place again that it came from and become the little tapeworm that he is, as Max Kaiser always portrays him as. And I totally agree. He's like a tapeworm, sitting in the intestine of the global monetary financial system and just sucking out, constant capital. And what you got to understand, these parasites that are sitting on the economy, like this, the banksters are, and stealing from us. What is going to happen eventually is these parasites are going to, become bigger than the host themselves, and then they die.
Well, you know what I find funny, John, is last year at Anarchapulco 2017, we were staying at this hotel in Diamante, and right next door to the Anarchapulco conference, guess who was there? It was Comex. It was a huge Comex convention, and then Comex, when that ended, it was replaced by some police convention. And I thought it was hilarious considering what Anarchapulco is all about, and just maybe a few of them snuck into the conference and learned a few things about what a real market looks like, the free market, and real free markets that are decentralized. So with that said, yeah, there's always going to be manipulation. Even in cryptocurrencies, there's always going to be manipulation by banks as long as those banks exist. It would be crazy for them not to get involved in some form of manipulation and rigging, because they profit off of it. That's the only thing that holds them up, because they are just based around debt, and they are just based around the impoverishment of the populace, and eventually people run out of money to steal. So when I look at a story like this, it's like, well, yeah, of course they've done this. Why wouldn't they do that? They're a scheming bank. That's what they're built around. They are built around manipulation tactics, and it's all going to come to an end, because we are watching this desperation build up among the banking system, among the central banking system, among government. This attempt to stop the centralization or the decentralization of society, and we see the stock market is kind of getting to this point where it's a little scary for those. It's overheating. People are still piling money in for some reason, buying high, selling low.
And as we did in our recent article about BlackRock, we talked about how he's promoting, you got to get that cash out of your pocket and throw it onto the stock market. It's so important to get at the top. Yeah. At the top, when it's about to drop down to the bottom, into the bottomless pit of despair, where most people actually end up because of, they don't understand. They haven't taken the advantage of actually educating themselves on the market, understanding what's going on. So they buy high and sell low. And that's what we saw with, of course, the recent crash, a little correction again in Bitcoin and other currencies. We saw people panicking, selling high, buying high and then selling low, while the smart people sold high and then are now buying low again. So
well, and then of course with any market, there's those that come with the market that are fundamentally bad and not sound. Like there's a lot of altcoins in the cryptocurrency market that are just terrible, and there is a bubble coming, there is a bubble burst coming, and that bubble burst will cause a massive crash in the market. But with that said, all the good ones will continue to rise up far and beyond what they are today. And in my opinion, I mean, looking at a lot of the altcoins and cryptocurrencies, they have no fundamentals. They're like the dot-com bubble, where there's a whole bunch of IPOs coming out that have no provable sales record, no actual fundamental reason for their existence. They're just like money grabs for people to pump and dump. And then there's a lot of really great ones like Steam and EOS and Bitcoin, etc. But I don't want to go too off subject with the whole cryptocurrency.
I just want to mention something on that topic. I remember an old skit from Norway where they had a whole bunch, like they talking about DNA, copying people with DNA, and they were constantly a more stupider and stupider copy of the person coming out. Yeah. And this is the same thing with cryptocurrencies. There's more and more like just worse and worse versions that come out as, it just becomes so over exaggerated, and everybody's trying to create their own cryptocurrency. Of course it's going to happen. There's going to be a massive correction, but then as Josh said, we're going to see those good ones, those fundamentals, solid currencies that was built for the future, that actually has a great amount of application into real society, real free markets, that will actually succeed.
Yeah, which is why Amazon still exists, which is why Google exists. You might not like the companies, but they had fundamentals, and that's why we saw a huge crash for even them during the dot-com bubble, but we saw them rise up a billion times more. Well, not exactly a billion, but a lot more than they were during the dot-com bubble, rather than pets.com, which is like Dentacoin in the cryptocurrency world, where it's just based on like dental hygiene, has no real fundamental value. But I mean, looking at the gold and silver markets, this was always going to happen. There's the Exchange Stabilization Fund, which we've talked about, huge manipulator who was funded in 1933 under FDR by the stolen or confiscated gold from the populace, which later also went into the IMF. There's a lot of manipulation, especially since 2012. There's been a massive amount of gold manipulation in order to try and keep the market down, in order to stop the growth of gold and the destruction of the dollar, which is on our doorstep.
Yeah, well, I done research work on, they're talking about traders here, trying to keep the price down. Well, what happened, for example, before 2001, when the price was going up in gold, I ran all the numbers, through the spreadsheets, and I found a, funny little pattern of smaller central banks dumping all their reserves onto the market in order to keep that gold price down. They were desperate because as soon as that gold price just goes and becomes uncontrollable, that means that the faith in the currency have diminished and disappeared, and that means that the currency will fail. So that's what they're fighting here. They're fighting like with tooth and nail, everything that they got in order to manipulate and hold this market down. And of course, the contracts, that are printed on top of the physical metal underlying, it's just such a crazy thing. Now there is two different things. It's a registered account and an unregistered account. The ones that you see on COMEX, they're unregistered, so everybody can get any type of gold there. But if you all have a registered account, you actually have a physical serial number that you own, and that's what people don't understand. Like, a lot of people get into these stuff. If you want to buy any kind of garbage paper gold, I would say most of them you should be very, very afraid of investing in them. If you were to buy one, at least buy a registered one that tells you that you own this like physical serial number on this bar. If you don't, then you should get out right away, and then you won't get your physical gold from the account. So just go and buy the physical metal at a precious metals dealer.
Yeah. Well, I prefer like decentralized assets, or physical gold and silver and that kind of stuff. And I think most should be looking towards that, away from the manipulated derivatives markets. Everything's manipulated, but there's a level of future wealth. So insurance of your wealth with gold and silver, to a certain extent, insurance of your wealth with cryptocurrencies, but mostly like a huge innovation that's going to skyrocket as time goes on, because blockchain, for good or evil, is the future, and it's up to us to decide whether it's going to be for good or evil. I mean, it's like what I often say on my show on We Are Change, is that if you look at a gun, you can use a gun to slaughter a whole bunch of innocent people, but you could also use that same gun to save all those innocent people from being slaughtered. Just like the same thing goes for blockchain, where you can use it to create a centrally planned fiat global cashless society, or you can use it for a decentralized cryptographic free market currency that's competing on the free market for the best fundamentals win, and not enforced by legal tender laws. So with that said, I mean, gold and silver, they're looking like they are just ready to skyrocket beyond what we could ever imagine. They are so incredibly undervalued, in my opinion. And then, of course, blockchain technology, the good decentralized cryptocurrencies, these are very undervalued if they have core fundamentals. Like Steam, I can see something building up with Steam like an earthquake, and it's gonna be so intense, and people need to look decentralized, because humans always naturally decentralize their lives.
Josh, you got it wrong. It's not an earthquake. It's steam bubbling up underneath the surface.
Yeah, a volcano. Absolutely. So thanks for going into this with us, John. We'll be back at you with much more. There's always something coming out. I mean, manipulation doesn't take a day off, folks. It's what the markets are all about these days. It's just corporatism, government control, monopolization, manipulation, monetary.
Yeah. No, it's such a failure, the whole markets right now. It has nothing to do with free markets whatsoever. And I just laugh at these people on TV talking about free markets. Like they have no clue what they're talking about.
I think free markets are regulated by the government. That's the funniest part. It's insane. Anyway, so until next time, folks, I'll see you later. This is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change, and don't trust bankers. Like what you see here at WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube, as the Anti-Defamation League comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. You can also find me at Josh Sigurdson at steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post via Steem, the cryptocurrency. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And don't forget to come on down to Anarchapulco in Acapulco, Mexico in February, one of the best events of the year, and you can save money on your tickets by typing in promo code WAM. That's WAM. We'll leave the link below for you, and until next time, don't forget to subscribe. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.